Good morning, folks. This is John Kogan, the CEO of Proformative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. I'd like to welcome everyone to this morning's webinar entitled The Evolving Role of Business Analytics for Finance and Operations. Finance organizations are increasingly asked to provide metrics, information, and tools for sound business decisions. Coming up with the right information at the right time requires direct collaboration and knowledge sharing across finance, sales, marketing, and operational organizations. Traditional approaches to business analytics are slow, hard to build and maintain, not very adaptable, and most often offer information that is not readily actionable. Recent advances in technology and techniques are affording companies opportunities to leverage business analytics to improve decision-making across the enterprise. In today's webinar, we will take a look at best practices, at case studies, and hear from a couple folks who are deeply steeped in these issues and with helping companies overcome them. So first up, I'd like to thank today's sponsors, Baker Tilly and Host Analytics. They allow us to put on events like this at no cost. And as folks who are familiar with Proformative know, everything we do is at no cost to our users. So a great thanks to Baker Tilly and Host Analytics, not only for their support, but also for speakers and content today. These firms really know a lot about the evolving role of analytics for finance and operations. Next up, I would like to spend a quick moment on Proformative. For those of you for whom this is your first Proformative event, or perhaps you're new to Proformative, we are the largest and fastest growing online resource for senior finance, treasury, accounting, and related professionals. We reach over 500,000 of these folks on a monthly basis. And basically what we do on Proformative.com is share knowledge, ask questions, answer questions. It's a wonderful place that's completely ad-free and noise-free, no self-promotion allowed at all. And it's just a great resource. I've been in finance and accounting for over 20 years, and something I wish I had during that entire tenure. A couple of quick notes on today's event. First off, a link to today's presentation and a video of this webinar, a link to the presentation and the video of this webinar will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event and will be posted here on Proformative under the resources area. It's actually already out there, so anyone who wants to go and grab it can do so, and feel free. In fact, feel free to share it if you like. We have a number of folks who are signed up to get CPE credits today. If you did not pre-register for CPE credits, that's okay. Just reach out to Tanya Walsh. You see her email address right there, and she will make sure you get taken care of. In fact, if you have any CPE questions at all, just email Tanya. She runs our CPE program at Proformative. And also, actually, regarding that CPE credit thing, we're going to ask 2 polling questions today. Please make sure you answer them both if you want CPE credit. Also, please ask questions today. We'd like this to be an interactive experience, and please take just one moment to look at your GoToWebinar control panel. You'll see a little area there called Questions. And in that area is space, clearly, to ask questions. We will do our best to get to all the questions that get asked today. We can't always get to all of them during the event, but if we don't get to them, we'll do our best to follow up afterwards and make sure we get your question answered. So please ask questions at any time, and then the last 10 minutes or so of today's webinar is actually going through audience questions, so please feel free. And finally, at the end of today's presentation, you'll be asked to take a short survey regarding the webinar. We always want to do better the next time. Please give us just 60 seconds of your time to let us know how we did and what we could do better. We really take that feedback to heart, so we would greatly appreciate that. Plus, if you want to connect directly with either of today's speakers, in that survey, it's just a mouse click away, and we're happy to connect you with the speakers. Today we've got a lot of things to cover, but the long and short of it is we want to help everyone in the audience today learn more about how to get their hands around business analytics in order to help finance and operating organizations stay on top of and improve company performance. And helping us in this, first up today is Alex Ortiz, who's a Director of Product Marketing at Host Analytics. Alex heads up product marketing for Host, Prior to host, he was product marketer for Salesforce.com, which everyone knows about. Before that, he was a senior associate for Sierra Ventures, a top-tier Silicon Valley venture capital firm with over $1.5 billion in investments. Earlier in his career, Alex was an associate at Santander Bank's venture capital arm, which was called B2B Factory Ventures. Alex, we're very happy to have you with us here today, and please take it away.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here today. And what I wanted to do over the next 20 minutes is share with you what we've learned through the last decade working with thousands of finance professionals, and really to paint a picture of how finance organizations are taking their analytics into the next level. And I'm assuming a couple things in this presentation. One is maybe you already have an analytics initiative underway, or that you already recognize the importance of starting an analytics initiative. So really what I'll be doing is sharing a couple best practices. I'll review 8 steps to turn analytics into reality in your company. And then we'll follow up with 2 case studies to show what results other companies are achieving with their analytics projects. First, I'd like to start with a 30,000-foot view of what success looks like from a point of view of a CFO. They focus on really getting 3 pillars of success right. Oftentimes, it starts with driving accountability throughout their organization. So they're looking at ways to make sure that the managers of each business unit is accountable and taking ownership for their area. And this really has meant a shift from a centralized planning process that formerly didn't involve managers to a really decentralized process where the manager input in the budget and analysis process is a key step to what the company does and what the finance organization pushes forward. The next main pillar that CFOs are thinking about is scalability, focusing on how to grow their company in a scalable way, both from a systems point of view and from a people point of view, obviously with the goal being to scale and grow without scaling and growing costs at the same rate. And then the third pillar that many CFOs are thinking about is, how do they drive better decisions, not just within their finance organization and, with executives, but across the company, and how can they really leverage systems to do that intelligently, that focus on really the facts in the company and not just relying on gut intuition. So this is, I think the 3 areas that most organizations are striving towards, but there's some real challenges to get there. And let's talk about that briefly. So here's an interesting study by Deloitte. This is their Q1 2012 study, and it really uncovers one of the main challenges, and that is finance organizations are struggling to provide the metrics, information, and tools needed to make sound business decisions. I think more and more finance organizations are looked to as the custodian of data, and almost all roads lead to finance to be able to analyze information, finance information and operational information. What was also interesting about the study is in Q1, there's been a 10-point increase in interest, or in basically the recognition of this being a major challenge point for finance organizations. So, what are companies doing about this challenge? Next, I'll lay out what they are looking to analyze and how they're going about doing it. So this research is a courtesy of Ventana Research. They surveyed 847 finance organizations, and they asked them, what are you looking to analyze? And over half of those organizations indicated that they're looking to analyze financial, sales, customer, and employee data. And this makes a lot of sense. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. Clearly, employee data tends to represent one of the largest OpEx costs in a balance sheet. And then, of course, on the sales side, many companies realize that it's critical, just critical to get the forecast correct because it drives so much of the rest of the business. So I want to touch on a couple examples of best practices in those two areas. First, in workforce and employee cost analytics, and second, in revenue or detailed sales planning analytics. So when we talk to finance organizations, when we ask them, what are you doing or what do you want to do around workforce planning, they'll come back with usually a top 3 list of things that they'd like to get a better handle on. First is really getting a detailed headcount report by individual. And this report includes all compensation items, base, bonus, plus any benefits. It also includes, obviously, tax and statutory withholdings. And this is really helping to drive more accuracy around kind of the detail aspects of workforce planning. Next, they'll say that they are looking to compare and analyze compensation on different budget scenarios. So oftentimes in the strategy session with executives, there's a lot of what-if questions, meaning if we're hiring for growth, how quick can we hire? If we're not able to fill positions, what does that look like? What does that do to our P&L? And they're really looking for tools to be able to slice and dice different scenarios. And the third top area is really they're looking for an ability to drill down and compare details on different accounts, do a lot of comparative analysis across the business in support of the business. Now we compare and contrast that with what the business unit managers are looking for. We take the case of a typical operational VP. So their use cases or their needs around workforce planning tend to be different. First off, they really want to focus on who they need to hire and how they need to manage those teams. And they don't necessarily want to look at how to calculate payroll budgets. They want that to be automatic. The second area is, obviously, as they're managing their business unit, payroll tends to be one of the biggest percentages of total cost. And so they quickly want to understand variances that are happening in their budget. And of course, workforce planning is a big piece of that process. And the third area an operational VP tends to look at is benchmarks. They want to analyze their payroll costs in their business unit versus other companies. And that's a key, usually a key performance indicator on how they're managing their business unit. So what you see here is basically two different views of the same workforce planning analytics process. And of course, there's different requirements by different users of the process. And so when you're thinking about analytics systems, it's really important to think about all the different people involved in the process and how those people might have different information needs, different timing needs, and different analysis needs. So let's look at another best practice regarding revenue planning analytics. Many companies today, unfortunately, are stuck with information that's backwards looking. They tend to have to rely on historical actuals and projections that sometimes can feel like guesswork. And there's lots of reasons why companies are stuck looking at backwards-looking data, and it usually comes down to the analytic systems and the underlying systems that they have. What we see with best practice companies, basically world-class companies, is they're also incorporating forward-looking data into their revenue planning. So they might be bringing in actual sales pipeline information from their CRM system. They might be bringing their marketing pipeline through their marketing automation or website analytics systems. And they can even be looking further out, basically outside the walls of their company, at economic indicators. Obviously, with the volatility in the economy today, and with all the changes going on in Europe, it's becoming even more important to make sure your systems are bringing in information that's going to help you anticipate changes coming down to your revenue cycle. And so what these companies are finding, obviously, is by bringing in forward-looking data, they're really driving accuracy up on their mid and long-range planning. So next I want to transition to talk about the 8 steps that companies typically go through to put in an analytics system. And the first step that we recommend is actually to really define your analytics nirvana. What's the end goal of the information you need and the different people that need it? And usually that starts off with looking at the drivers of the business, both the financial metrics and the operational metrics. Then number 2 is really looking at the frequency of how often you need to analyze that information. It could be weekly, monthly, or quarterly. And some companies actually have daily alerts on what's happening in their business, and obviously that helps for business agility. The third area that they're defining is the context of the information. Whether they need to compare that information against trends over time versus external benchmarks, or even versus their budget planning process. The fourth step in defining their analytics nirvana is looking at the format. What's the best way to present the data, whether it's dashboards, ad hoc reporting, or if you're a public company, you have to basically take into account the statutory filing requirements with 10Ks, 10Qs, and XBRL requirements. So really, the thing to remember here is there's no wrong way to set out these goals, but what we do find is, companies start out in this process, and 6 months in, they discover a better way to analyze something. A year in, their business might change drastically, and they really need to have a flexible system in place to be able to incorporate those changes that were sometimes unanticipated or sometimes anticipated. So flexibility is key in the systems you are looking at, and also to understand that this is always going to be an evolving set of requirements. The next steps company go through is to take their goals around reporting and analytics and then locate the data sources that can feed into that analysis. So some of this may look typical for many companies because they generally start out in very similar places. Oftentimes, managers' budgets are stuck in Excel spreadsheets. The top-down targets for a company can also be stuck in the same Excel spreadsheets from different folks, maybe executives. They find that the explanation of the variances in the budgeting process are often stuck actually in emails, and the bodies of emails explaining why one business unit had a different result than expected. Then, of course, they look to where do their actuals sit. Obviously, most companies have a general ledger or enterprise resource planning system. That's all familiar information, but it's good to make sure you know the full scope of what's in those systems. Then companies are looking at, well, where's some of the operational data? What sort of departmental applications do we have in other departments, and how can we start leveraging that information? And finally, they think about external drivers, whether it's currency rates or economic indicators. Oftentimes the status quo is people are looking at websites and manually looking for that information and scouring the web for it. So let's move to step 3. And after they've located the data sources, then the task becomes, okay, now we need to integrate those data sources so we can have a single source of truth. So I'll work on this diagram in a clockwise fashion. And in terms of the budgeting information that's generated by people, they're really looking at a familiar way to bring that information in from managers into the system. That drives, obviously, accountability for the managers, since they're the ones inputting the information, but it also drives scalability. So that comes back to the 3 pillars that, that CFOs are looking to put in. Then, of course, they're looking for ways to integrate external data into the same system, removing manual effort to do so. And then, of course, consolidating the actuals from their ERP system. Many companies today have grown organically or inorganically and may have more than one ERP system in their company. And obviously, a way to do a financial consolidation to roll up that information is essential to be able to analyze the wider results of the company. And then finally, they're looking at ways to bring in operational data into that same single source of truth. And this is a real area of opportunity for many companies. I think over the last few years, people have understood that that now that there's SaaS applications or cloud applications that, say, the sales department runs, the marketing department runs, that there's really a lot of information available within a company. The challenge is getting that information into one place to have a wider view of performance. And that really takes us to the 4th step that companies go through in building a robust analytics environment. So they really look at unsiloing operational data, and that operational data is currently stuck in departmental apps. So what you see here on the screen is what we would call finance analytics and performance management. Most finance organizations already have pretty good access to their ERP systems, and they're looking to enhance the reporting and dashboarding off that system. And they may put something in that's a little bit more limited in scope. Let's just call it finance analytics. They also realize, though, that while it's often a win to get better information from your ERP system, they also need to look outside of the ERP system to build a more robust view of their company. And that's why they start pursuing business analytics initiatives. They look to add in intelligence from their sales analytics system, whether it's Salesforce or Siebel or any other system. They look to their operational information that may be in other systems like SAP or Plex. And then finally, they're also looking at bringing in marketing information from marketing automation providers like Marketo or Eloqua, and also combining that with workforce information coming from other systems like SuccessFactors or PeopleSoft or even Saba. And really, when they do this, when they unsilo that information, they're able to make new observations on the health of their company and respond faster to changes. It really opens up the analysis capabilities. So it's not just stovepiped within finance, but also folks in the other departments have a wealth of information to make better decisions. And that comes back once again to one of the 3 pillars, and that's driving better decision-making across the company. So oftentimes companies want to automate their recurring processes, and they're looking at ways to bring in currency exchange rates, peer benchmarks, and economic indicators. In their actuals, they're automating journal adjustments, foreign exchange adjustments, and intercompany eliminations. There's some real time savings here. We've seen some companies reduce the time to close by 50%. Clearly, they're looking to automate recurring processes in the budgeting process, whether it's top-down adjustments, rolling a period, or variance reporting. And also, obviously, there's a lot of recurring processes involved in quarterly management reports, quarterly finance reports, things that you can really increase the cycle time to create. Number 6, so companies often then think about what's the best way to present the data. Oftentimes, dashboards are a good starting point for companies to pinpoint opportunities and changes in their business. They're thinking about ad hoc reports, the things that are unplanned but necessary to analyze quickly on the fly. Obviously, they're thinking about how to present management data, whether it's business unit P&Ls or board reports and presentations, and how they can add not only the formatting necessary, but the speed to produce those. Then, of course, if you're a public company, they're thinking about how to present 10Ks and 10Qs with the different accounting treatments and statutory reporting requirements. Number 7, companies are often thinking about how to empower their companies to make better decisions. Oftentimes we speak with companies where finance is really the bottleneck in getting information out, and no one wants to be the bottleneck. And companies are really realizing that they need to be able to push information out and allow managers, business unit managers, to have a self-service analytic system that they can modify on their own without having to call an IT specialist, or even without having to call an FP&A manager to adjust a report. To do this, it really requires an application that's not only easy to use by business unit managers, but also is powerful enough for the finance department. And what I really mean is a system that allows finance to put on the granular controls to data access. Obviously, there's very sensitive information that needs to be locked down and treated appropriately. And it also needs to be robust enough to support the deep analysis that finance often wants to undertake. And finally, what a requirement is that we see is a way to be more proactive. People are looking for systems that push real-time alerts to decision makers, so that way they don't always have to log in every day or every week to know that something has changed in their business, and that really drives responsiveness across the company. And then really the next area that companies are undergoing as they're thinking about their analytics initiative is to really set realistic expectations. The good thing about cloud technology is it's expanded the capabilities of small and medium companies to leverage the same powerful analytics that formerly large companies could only afford. And so these are just very ballpark numbers. We see smallest companies with narrow requirements going live in as fast as 2 weeks, spending anywhere between 20, 30K on a project, and having one person within their finance team really spearhead it. Of course, larger companies that have complex situations with very broad requirements, you'll see it'll take longer. Obviously, the budgets vary greatly on what needs to get done and how much that might cost. And they often have a dedicated project team that could be either in-house or a third party providing that project management expertise. So transitioning to 2 quick case studies so you get a sense of what companies are achieving here. We have Thule, who you might be familiar with. They make the racks that go on cars that carry skis and bikes. And before putting in an analytics system, they really struggled with late and inconsistent Excel data. Oftentimes meetings were very long because people were debating the validity and accuracy of the data. And it was an inflexible process and system, meaning that they couldn't make mid-year adjustments and adjust the sales forecasting, which really had some negative effects for them. Now, after putting in a system, clearly they had confidence in their data and they could drive reporting out to the business managers. But the most important thing was they really uncovered opportunities to save money for their business by connecting their inventory system with their sales forecasting system, and they were able to make better decisions. In fact, they were able to reduce their inventory by $1 million, and that was a real tangible savings to put in an analytics system. Moving on to our second case study, Cell Therapeutics is a cancer drug company out of Seattle, Washington. And they're transitioning from being an R&D centric business to a sales and marketing business. They're going through FDA approval process. And they're really trying to prepare themselves to move from a manual kind of a manual systems and processes to a scalable way. They're going to hire a bunch of salespeople and grow marketing, and they need to have the systems to be able to scale quickly once they get approval. And what they've done is chosen a system that combines corporate performance management and business analytics into one place. And this also is allowing them to do self-service reporting, which the business can really own, use, and modify. And it's also a system that they're comfortable with in not only their needs for today, but in their needs from a year from now as they're scaling and growing and changing. And so they're really excited to put the system in because it's really going to support a lot of growth in their business. And with that, John, I'd like to pass it back to you.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that information and insight. Before we get to our next speaker, we have the first of two polling questions. Now, if you are here for CPE credits, you must take this and the next polling question, which will come out at the end of the next section. But even if you're not here for CPE credits, would love to have you just take a moment. And this is not a test of comprehension. This is more about getting some interesting statistical data that we can all share and benefit from. While we are giving about a minute for folks to take a look at this quick question and give us your answers, I'll remind you to ask questions at any time. The questions will be addressed by the speakers when we get to the Q&A portion of today's webinar, which will come after the next presentation. With that, I'm actually going to give about 3 more seconds and get your answers in. We'll go ahead and close down the poll, which I'm going to do right now, and we will introduce our second speaker. Also joining us today on this tour of business analytics for finance and operations is Michael Husanek, who's the Director of Business Analytics at Baker Tilly Virchow Krause, LLP. Michael leads a performance management group for Baker Tilly Consulting and has over 12 years of experience with small, medium, and large-sized companies. Michael's focus is on assisting organizations as they develop their business analytics vision and roadmaps, as well as design their information architecture and delivery platforms, which are needed to deliver increased performance levels. With that, Michael, I will go ahead and hand it off to you. Take it away.
Great. Thanks, John. Let's try to get slides here to move forward. There we go. All right, just a little bit of more background about me before we start. I am a CPA. I have both finance and accounting degrees. Been in the business intelligence and corporate performance management field for over 15 years now. And for me, these are really exciting times. As information is just exploding right now and some of the technology advances, they're presenting just a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges to go along with that. We'll cover some of those in the presentation. I thought Alex did a particularly nice job of laying out the process that's needed to kind of effectively leverage information and take advantage of that and turn that into a corporate asset. What we're going to talk about is what's driving the need for that process as a critical must-have. So specifically, the data explosion and the new types of information that are out there, the business opportunities that this new type of information is creating, and some of the challenges to go along with that. We'll also talk specifically about the role of finance in driving and managing those opportunities, and then leave you with some key considerations and talk about creating an information strategy. Most companies that we work with that are effectively leveraging information do have what's called an information strategy, which is an organized series of initiatives to create the capabilities that you need within different areas of the business to most effectively leverage information. So we'll get into that as well towards the end. So are you overwhelmed with too much data? 40 exabytes of data were created in 2008. And I had to look up that word when I first found it. Over 1 billion gigabytes in 1 exabyte of data. So over 40 created in 2008, more than created in the previous 5,000 years combined. Google, who we also watch quite closely and whose mission it is to manage and organize the world's information, states that every 2 days we create as much information as we did up until 2003. So a tremendous amount of volume of information that's out there. And the reality is it's only going to get worse because it's not only a problem with volume. That's been around for a little while now. There's some decent solutions solutions out there to address that. But it's also a problem with the variety and the velocity and the volatility of the data. So what do we mean by that? Variety of data. Over 80% of all new information that's coming into play now is going to be in non-traditional forms. So things like Twitter and blogs and web clickstream data, over 80% of all new information is going to be in a non-traditional format. Velocity of data. So if you think about things like Twitter or blogs or web clickstream data, that never really shuts off, so that the information is now constantly coming at you. And also the volatility of data. So if you continue on with the Twitter analogy, if you're following a Twitter feed and Twitter decides to change some descriptive information about that feed, well, they don't tell you. So how do you have a plan to deal with that, right? So it's really, 4 primary areas that you're trying to get your head around to leverage information most effectively. So what are some of these growing data sources that are really driving this explosion in those 4 areas? Well, if you think about it, information really started to come into the scene, back when ERP systems first started to come in line. So 20, 25 years ago, and they've really started to take hold. That's what drove the initial set of information. So these core and legacy ERP systems. Then they started to get combined. Alex talked about this a little bit. So combining that information with point of sales data, web tracking data, different CRM data, maybe RFID tagging data, those started to come into play, which is really your core and your legacy internal data. Most companies have this information, but what we're seeing now that's creating this explosion is this new age external and environmental and market data. So what do I mean by that? Things like Yelp and Facebook, right? New advertising platforms, new connections to your customers, new sets of financial data, collaboration platforms that you're using internally, new types of point of sale data. Mobility is a huge emerging trend that's driving lots of new sets of data. All of the different apps that are out there now, there's over 500,000, I think, on the iPhone right now, and I gave a similar presentation a few months back, and I think the number was about 250 at that time, so just an incredible amount of explosion in the types of applications that are out there to be leveraged. Talked about various forms of unstructured data, so blogs and Twitter. Most of the information in there is probably not going to be relevant, so how do you comb through all of that information to pull out the relevant pieces? Video, we're seeing that come into play within marketing models. Weather data is also another very hot area, so how you're leveraging that, that covers a lot of different industries, right? It could be within agronomy and yield on soils. It could also be related to maintenance of products that you have out in the field. Location-based services. We were talking with a company recently that they had installed tracking devices on their delivery trucks to monitor steering wheel movement, and then also acceleration and deceleration. And the analytical application that came out of that was to show drivers the specific areas of the roads that they were having the most trouble with, right? So dramatically reducing health and safety costs once they put that solution into place. One other one that I'm particularly fond of is the KPI library. So what we're seeing now is more new sets of information becoming available for you to take advantage of. One area is around benchmarking. It's kind of a blessing and a curse within analytics. You can apply it almost anywhere. So knowing what place to start can be half the challenge sometimes. So taking advantage of new sets of information that are coming online that say, hey, this is where most people are at within this function or within this process. You know where you're at. How do you line up against those? That will help you kind of focus in on the initial part of your roadmap. What areas are going to have the most opportunity for benefit. So lots of new things that are out there. But with all of those new sets of information, come a set of challenges. This was a study done recently by the IBM Institute for Value, highlighting some of the typical challenges that organizations face when trying to leverage information. So 1 in 3 managers frequently make decisions without the information that they need, right? So they need to make the decision. They wish they had better information, but they just don't have it. 1 in 2 don't have access to the information that they need across their organization. So that's a different problem. The information actually exists within the organization. They just don't have access to it. So it's locked away in a spreadsheet or an ERP system somewhere, and they can't actually get that out to make the right decision. And then a new area that is particularly exciting is the inability to predict. So 3 in 4 leaders say that more predictive information would drive better decisions. And we're seeing this in budgeting and planning processes, right? If you think about, your typical annual budgeting or your forecasting process. Maybe you took last year's actuals, added on a certain percentage point to increase it, or maybe have seasonality models built in there, different kind of spreads of how the year is going to look. What we're seeing now is organizations leverage internal and external data to build more predictive models to increase the accuracy in their forecast and work that in as one of their scenarios. So with these challenges, what's the model to kind of get it right? There's lots of different ones that are out there. I like this one in particular just because it keeps it simple. You focus in on two main areas, right? So on the bottom is the resource use. That's pretty standard. That's probably not going to be new for many people, but I do think it's worth revisiting due to some of the things that Alex said. There's a lot of new technologies that are out there. So what the x-axis focuses on is effectively leveraging your resources, right? So that's usually going to be the people and the technologies that you're leveraging. So having a plan to understand what technologies are out there and how you can best leverage those to go after using your information, that's a very important piece of the puzzle. Then, combined with the data utilization side, what we're really talking about there is how you're focusing your information, right? So, you've got your corporate strategy, you set your corporate strategy, which areas present the most opportunities? So which processes or which functions, is it sales, is it marketing? What information is important to those processes? That's the second piece of the equation. So understanding that and combining that with some of the technology and the right people really helps you get up to where you want to be, which is in the competitive advantage side. And so, that's the ultimate goal, right, is to create true competitive advantage in your market. Some additional points to consider around this model is maximizing the value. There's so much information out there. Understanding the value that you want to get out of it is a very important part. And again, that's tying it back to the specific process or function that you're going after. And Alex hit on this a little bit, but I think I want to reemphasize it. Finance really is in a unique position to understand, the areas of the business, what's going to be important. Alex talked about kind of pushing those metrics out. Understanding that value doesn't come as easily to different areas of the business. So that's an area that finance can really plug into and play a key role in. Another key point is, more data is available to businesses of all sizes. It used to be a challenge to get the data. Now the challenge is shifting to, we've got too much, what is actually important within that data, but, it's important to really understand the new types of information that are coming online because they're coming online all the time. So having a plan around that is very important. And there are better tools, with lower cost. I've hit on that again. Some of the cloud-based technologies, mobile technologies that are out there, lots of different tools to crunch this big data. And a key point also is, memory is virtually unlimited now. So some of the cost barriers to entry also really dropping. And ultimately what you're after is to get those decision makers the right information and in the right context. It's not so much about the decision, but we like to say it's increasing the knowledge within the decision-making process because everybody makes decisions a little bit differently, right? But if you know the processes and the functional areas that you're focused on, and you work at increasing the information and the knowledge within those processes, you're going to enable better decisions. That's just going to be a byproduct of it. So focusing in on that is really a key part to ultimately get you to where you want to be, which is competitive advantage. And we'll talk about a couple of examples of those coming up. But first, we're all finance, so we all like to put numbers around everything. So what does this opportunity look like? This is another study done by IBM, the Global CFO study. I think it looked at 50 different organizations of varying sizes to say, are you effectively leveraging information? And if you are, what are some of the returns that you're seeing on that? So we've highlighted 3 from that study here. Shows that businesses that are effectively leveraging information to drive better decisions and understanding within their organization realize these gains. So 33% more revenue growth, 12 times more EBITDA, 32% higher return on invested capital. So some pretty significant returns. What I want to take you through now is 3 examples of companies that are using these types of data to get better returns that we just talked about. First is a manufacturing company. What they were after was better field service and production decisions. So what were the new types of information that they were leveraging? Well, they were looking at machine diagnostic data, so just data that was continually being taken on their product that's out in the field, to determine which parts of those machines were breaking down or were more likely to break down, and then combining that with also unstructured data, which were service technician notes about those machines. Ultimately, what they were after was to combine that with their core transactional data, so the information flowing through those machines, to better proactively service those machines, and ultimately not ship product with potentially defective parts, right? So some pretty significant process changes, right? You know, pretty large staff out there servicing machines. So to be able to manage that better would realize some significant cost gains on that side. And if you're not shipping product with defective parts, you know, even bigger cost savings. So that was the path they were on, all starting with combining some of these new kinds of information with their traditional core transactional data. Second one is financial service companies. So what they were after was better investment decisions, so tracking all available data around their investment portfolios to be able to react faster and make better decisions for their clients. So what they did was really look at combining their internal investment databases, which traditionally they'd use to make most of their decisions, with new sets of external data. So things like Charles River Database Management System, external data from stock exchanges and news coverage, combining that with their internal data to create a new picture of their investment portfolio, and ultimately to be able to react faster to what's going on in the marketplace. Finally, looks like one of these is missing. Oh, there we go. A little bit out of order. Finally, a marketing company. And so what marketing has been around for a while in terms of leveraging information, but we're seeing some shifts happening within the marketing department right now. They can use a lot of different areas. So one would be predictive analytics, so customer segmentation. If you think about the way most marketing campaigns work, there's an outlay of spend on the beginning, and then there's an expected return after the campaign is run. So using segmentation models to predict or more effectively target who you're going after can reduce the cost outlay on the front end and get you a higher uplift on the back end. Also seeing companies proactively market to individuals with what's called social clout. So these are people that a lot of people online are following them, so it's changing the marketing dynamics a little bit. Something that's particularly interesting is the marketing mix model. And what that is most companies, not all, but a lot, base their marketing decisions on Nielsen data. And what we're seeing is companies start to integrate new sets of data, 6, 7, 8 different data sources, combine that with Nielsen data, and to get a new picture of the consumer, right? So to drive an additional layer of consumer insight. And what they're talking about is this new picture changing the marketing mix models or turning them on their heads, and they've been using these for 15 years, right? So potential dynamic shift in how they're setting up their marketing mix models, all based on this new set of information. And tying it back to finance, they all affect the budgeting and planning processes, right? So if you're thinking about, production decisions, definitely is going to affect things. Service management or field service management, how you plan and manage the costs around that, is a big area of spend within a lot of companies. Financial services as well, the return on the investments you're going to get is also factors into the budgeting and planning process. And same with marketing, how much cost are you going to spend up front, and how's that going to impact sales on the back end? Being more accurate in that will affect your forecasts and your budgeting and planning processes. So real quickly, I've hit on this kind of throughout the presentation. I've hit on it as well, but we're seeing a shift in the role that finance is taking. Really have a unique opportunity here. I mean, finance really is the keepers of the data. You understand the data probably better than anybody else within the organization. So how do you help other departments leverage information, and how do you drive an information strategy within your organization? Well, some of the challenges that you used to have, static processes, reporting takes up the majority of the time. I'm sure you've heard most of these before. Very manually intensive, leaving little time left to get those insights that you need. Which, begs the question, what could you do with that better information in a more timely manner? What impact could it make? And what we're seeing, the shift in the finance organization, is really taking an active role in leveraging some of the new technologies that are out there. Alex hit on this. He gave, like I said, a really good process about how to go about doing this. Focusing in on the decisions which have the greatest impact to the organizational goals, leveraging the new technologies that are out there, and really start to push information into the decision process. I'll say it again, finance really has a unique opportunity here, as keepers of the data, to help other business units understand what information is important, to help focus initiatives on the right things that are going to impact the business and have the most material effect on it. And tying back to finance as well, all of this is going to affect how you're doing on your forecasts and your budgeting and planning. The better decisions that are made or more accurate decisions is all going to impact the financial planning process. So again, driving that agenda is going to help the internal finance process as well and help you realize some of those results that we talked about earlier. So just a couple of minutes left here, so I'll go real quickly through this. How can finance help drive this information strategy? Alex had a good process. I'll focus in on just 3 areas that I think complement that. You're going to have to pull the people lever at some point, so understand what role finance wants to take. Very busy organization, usually strapped for resources. Focusing in on those most important areas is a critical component of the process. And as well as understanding the roles and responsibilities for the decision, right? Who are the people that are going to be affected if you're going to change some of the processes you go around making decisions, or you're giving them increased knowledge? Who are those people? Make sure they understand some of the changes that are coming. What are the information requirements? Identify all the information that you need, understand what's out there, and really start to push that information to the decision makers. And pull all this together in an opportunities roadmap. So this is the strategy that I was talking about before. Decisions really are possible with better and faster information. Start with some tactical quick hits. Keep the big opportunities in mind as well, and start to shift that focus to more value-driven activities. Some key considerations. One thing to really highlight is number 1. The data really is available to businesses of all sizes now. It's to the point that you can't ignore it any longer. Companies are already competing and winning with it. Technology costs have plummeted. Better information is available faster than ever before. Keep in mind that 80% of that is going to be from the non-traditional format, so having a plan around that is going to be very important. Leverage the new technology platforms that are out there. Lots of things to take advantage of. Focus in on that benchmarking to give you an idea where to start. And again, it does require a structured way to think about it, because you're going to have lots of different opportunities to start. The companies that we work most with that leverage information effectively do have an information strategy. And what that is it's a set of capabilities that your organization is going to use to leverage information. And these are the 4 major groupings that you want to look at, right? Defining how you're going to leverage information, so that's focusing in on those processes and functions. What do the analytical solutions look like to drive improvement within those processes? And then the information layer, right? Building trust within the information layer and using an advanced technology platform to really integrate and pull that data all together. Companies that have this in place, we definitely find are realizing some of those benefits that we found before. So John, thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great. Okay, folks, we're going to keep on cracking here because time is running. We've got the second polling question for those here for CPE credit. As before, feel free to answer this question. It'll take you all of 5 seconds, whether you're here for CPE credit or not. We've got a number of questions queued up here already. We'll do our best to get to these, but go ahead. If you have any other questions for Alex or Michael, feel free to ask them via the question area in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll work on getting some of those taken care of in just a moment here. We'll give about 15 seconds additional time for the poll. Now, just one quick note, when we finish today's presentation, or when you step off and essentially leave the webinar, you will be presented with the opportunity to take a very quick survey. I'm talking 1 minute. Please give us that minute to let us know what we can do better the next time. And that will also give you the opportunity to ask to be connected directly with either of today's speakers with just a click of the mouse, and we're happy to help you make that connection. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close down the polling questions, and we'll hop right into the Q&A. first question, a wonderful question. And I'm going to start with Alex on this, but Michael, we'll move to you in just a second. Alex, how do you suggest reconciling user self-service with data complexity and user knowledge? There's so much data out there, and that point was made many times today, and yet you want to push the tools for analyzing and understanding that data out to people, and yet they can be overwhelmed. Finance, accounting, we're used to dealing with lots of information, but folks in other functions might not be. How do you reconcile that challenge? Alex, you might still be on mute.
Yes, certainly. So we do see that that is a big challenge. Even Mike commented on the fact that the challenge today isn't getting the data, it's organizing it effectively, and certainly we see that as a big challenge area. What companies are doing is usually within the finance department or finance with IT, they have a pretty broad scope of what data is available and where it gets used in a company. And with the right systems in place, they can also help to organize the scope of that information and lock down certain areas. So if you're a business unit manager, you don't have to see the whole, the whole, coming back to workforce planning, the whole compensation scale for everyone. You only see those people that you manage, and no one else can see it. And so there's really efficient ways now to organize and lock down that information, so it isn't overwhelming for for people that it's not their everyday job to analyze this stuff. And then on the other side of the equation, you have a finance department that is no longer spending 80% of their time just collecting the data. They now have 80% of their time to analyze the data, and they're doing a better job supporting those business units to not be overwhelmed by the information and also to analyze it effectively. So really, there's some transformations that are happening, and with the right technology, it can turn that challenge into an opportunity for many.
Hey, John, can I comment on that as well?
I was just going to ask you to.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. There's two main areas that we find companies using to help deal with that challenge. The first I alluded to it is, you really want to start with the business process and the function that you're targeting, and then the analytical application, and that term can be confusing, so I'll define that here, is what drives what information is important. So an analytical application could be anything, right? It could be a report, it could be a dashboard, it could be more of an advanced analytic, it could be an embedded analytic. There's lots of different analytical applications that are out there. So, understanding the process and what information is important, that's an important first step, because then you build the analytical application or report, whatever it may be, to just focus in that area. So that's step number one. And then this second one is emerging, because it's how to deal with the challenge. You're going to start hearing the term information discovery more often, because now you have too much information, right? And so there's a whole new set of technologies coming out that, that are already out really, that help you understand and gain insight into the vast amount of information. So you'll hear things like, enrichment of data, which is getting rid of 90% of the garbage. So you have functions within the organization really saying, okay, well, what information do we have? What's important first? And then out of that, you determine what you need to analyze. So that's an entirely new emerging area. It's like Gartner's creating a kind of whole new category for it. So it's an intermediary step to BI or analytics.
Great, thanks for that. So I'll tell you what, we have a couple other questions here, but I'm afraid we're not going to have time to get to them. I'm actually going to work with the speakers after the presentation to see that we can get those questions answered, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we're going to move right along and try and finish in the next minute here. First off, if you have any questions at all about CPE credit, you can see Tanya Walsh's email there at the bottom of this screen. Also, you will be presented with a survey immediately after this webinar is over, after we turn off the webinar or when you step off the webinar. Please give us 1 minute and give us your feedback, and if you'd like to be connected with either of today's speakers for any sort of future connection, please let us know. We're happy to help out with that. We would like to once again thank our friends at Baker Tilly and Host Analytics. Just wonderful information today. Both of these companies cover a lot of the content that we worked on today. They're truly experts in business analytics for finance and operations organizations, and we're just absolutely thrilled to have had them participating. And of course, thanks directly to Alex and Michael for your time and insight today. Really appreciate it, gentlemen.
Thanks, John.
And with that, we'd like to finally thank everyone who attended today for your time and attention. We greatly appreciate it and understand how busy you are. We look forward to seeing you again on another event for Performative or online at performative.com. And with that, I'll wish everyone a great week, and we will go ahead and shut down the webinar at this point. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.